Oh, good afternoon and welcome. Sorry I'm a bit late. I got a bit tied up there. Just the domestic arrangements. If there is an alarm for us to vacate the building, do not use the lifts and gather at the Queen Victoria statue. I've got to declare, haven't I, that it's also been streamed. Yeah. I think that means film, but there you are. I mean, people use the word stream, right? Do I deal with this now? I haven't seen... Do that later. Okay, we do have some apologies.
Apologies for absence are from Councillor John Ferret, Councillor Judith Smythe, and Councillor Graham Heaney is attending as standing deputy. And also apologies have been received from Councillor Simon Bosher, and we're expecting Councillor Terry Norton possibly to attend as standing deputy.
It's very exciting moving this from a Friday to a Tuesday. Fewer people turn up. If I went to a Monday, what do you think? It'd just be me. No? Okay, thank you very much. Can we'll just deal with the agenda then. So we've got that. Any declarations of interest from any members? Or officers, I suppose. No? Okay, thank you. I should say that, shouldn't I? Sorry, page 14. Yep. You're not reading word for word now, are you? No.
Of course.
Page 15 and page 16. Are they okay then? Can I sign those as a true record?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll get a clean copy from you. I'll second it. Yes, I know. Okay, can we move on to item 4, please? Which is Treasury Management Monitoring Report for the third quarter 1920. Michael, thank you.
The report outlines the Council's Treasury Management position at the 31st of December. Our Treasury Management activities remained within the Treasury Management policy. We didn't undertake any new borrowing in quarter 3. And at the end of December, we had £349 million invested at a average rate of 1.37%. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions from members? Hugh, please.
2 questions. One a specific one, one a more general one. The specific one, page 23. On the bottom paragraph, you are looking for cheaper sources of borrowing. Do you think that it will be possible to find cheaper sources of borrowing? And is there any update which you can give to us?
Yes, I believe it will be possible to find cheaper sources of borrowing. In fact, we have already received cheaper offers from lenders. The question really is to find the best source of borrowing in the new environment we're now in.
So, do you expect this to be much cheaper? And if so, approximately how much will we be able to borrow cheaper than we would get from the Public Works Loans Board?
And from what I've seen so far, I believe that we should be able to borrow for about 0.3 3% less than the PWLB.
The second question is slightly off the agenda, but I trust that the Chair will allow it. For investment activity, we look here at our investment in Lakeside North Harbour, which the audit report is very detailed about. 2 years ago at this meeting, in answer to a question from Mr. Ian Lyons, we were informed that we had invested in the Hampshire Community Bank and that it would get a full bank, expected it to get a full banking license by the beginning of 2020. Has that happened? Has it slipped? And if so, when can we A, expect a full banking license, and B, when can we begin to expect a return on our investment?
Now, Hampshire Community Bank has yet to get its banking licence. I informed that point is not too far away now. In terms of the bank's business plan, we'd have to get back to you on that because I don't know at this moment.
I should be grateful, therefore, if you would get back to myself and to members of the scrutiny panel about that, because it is a source of worry that this has been going on for so long, and this bit of business does not appear to be coming to a rapid conclusion. It is also a very considerable investment of this City Council's money.
Yes, I mean that is the case, obviously.
You'll get back to us, Michael.
Yes, we will get back to you about when we expect the banking licence to be obtained and when we expect to start getting a return on our investment after we've spoken to the bank.
Can I just apologise for being late? Sorry, Chair. I've got nothing to declare.
No, could I welcome Councillor Neil Young? Okay, thank you.
Just really to ask do you know what the reasoning behind the decision to increase the rate was? It said it was sudden unexpected. Do we know what the reason was?
Well, at the time, local authorities were investing heavily in commercial property across the country. The government did begin to suggest that they weren't entirely happy about it. Some councils invested very heavily. And for example, Speltform district bought BP's headquarters for, I believe, hundreds of millions, and I think it was that sort of action which aroused the government's attention. And for some time there was, I think, a feeling that the government would do something, but we didn't know what. And in the end they decided to dissuade local authorities from borrowing by increasing PWLB rates. I mean, I think there were other factors as well, because there was an immediate problem in that the large amount of borrowing from the PWLB meant that they were moving towards the limit of the amount they're allowed to lend. So the government did two things. It increased their lending limit so they could continue lending, but at the same time they increased the margin over gilt rates.
So the impact was actually to affect all borrowing, not just borrowing for commercial purposes, for buying commercial property.
Yes, that is absolutely the case.
Any other members? No? Okay. Can we agree the recommendations then on item 4, 3.1 and 3.2? Is that agreed? Thank you. Could I just... sorry, Liz. I was ambushed by Liz on the way in because somebody's in standby to come here up to 9 o'clock tonight, I think it was, Lynn, right? Yeah. Liz, yeah. Could you remind me? I've forgotten.
We have an exempt item right at the tail end, and it is whether members would like a member of staff to come along from the directorate to answer any technical questions. They're more than willing to, but I just thought I'd asked up front because I'll email them and tell them that when they finish their other meetings, if not.
This is the exempt report. Which we have gone into detail in the past in some things, but and we have to take exempt because it's exempt and therefore at the end rather than hold everybody else up. What we'd like to do, I think, and what Liz would like to do is to tell the person that either stay or go. Yeah. Have members got any, I mean, you've gone through these reports, have anybody got any questions on them? In order to detain the member of staff, that's all. Is there any questions on those particular ones?
I think, Chairman, that any minor questions which I might have could be answered after the meeting. They would not be pertinent to a decision.
Is that agreed, Member? Is that okay? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, item 5 then, which is the Treasury Management Policy 2021. Michael?
Yes, this is a report which will go on to the Cabinet and the Council for approval, and it's brought to this committee for scrutiny. The Treasury Management Policy isn't very different from previous years. The main changes are that we're recommending that we give preference to investments which support the environment, social impact and good governance, providing that...
Sorry, could I just hold you there? Graham, you may not have got a copy of this, did you? It was to follow. Did you get... that's it, okay, sorry, thank you.
Sorry. And, yeah, so we've recommending that we give preference to investments which improve the environment, have a social impact, or and have good governance, provided that in doing so we don't increase the risks to the council in terms of the security of the investment or liquidity, and also that it doesn't result in lower returns on our investment portfolio. The other main change concerns Hampshire Community Bank. Previously, lending to Hampshire Community Bank was to be secured on loans given by the bank, which in turn would have been secured on tangible fixed assets. In discussions with the bank, a lot of their potential lenders don't have tangible assets that the loan should be secured against, and in addition, the loans given by the bank are expected to be shorter, around 3 years. So what we're recommending is that the loan, that when we lend to Hampshire Community Bank, those loans will be secured on loans given by the bank, and they will be to counterparties of high credit worthiness, but they won't necessarily be secured on tangible assets. And we're also recommending that the maximum duration of loans from the Council to Hampshire Community Bank be reduced from 10 to 5 years. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions, members? Hugh, please.
On both of the points which you've made, the first one, you're saying we give preference to green, environmentally sensible investments. provided that they give the same level of return. Is this likely, given that the cheapest way to invest is to invest in areas which are not green and give a high rate of return? How are you going to ensure this? Question one.
I mean, from what we've seen, the investing in an environmental and social way will not necessarily reduce our returns. I mean, the other thing which we need to be mindful of is that where companies are involved in damaging the environment, going forward, they will be inevitably subject to more regulation, which could damage their profitability and therefore their creditworthiness. And also, if we've got a choice between two investments, and in terms of risk and secure and return, they're the same, why wouldn't you choose the one which had some benefit above financial?
Well, I say I hope you can find these. My second question comes back to the Hampshire Community Bank. Can you explain, because I'm not a banker and I'm not an investor, but I need to understand how a loan can be secured if it is not secured against assets. Because it is my understanding that in normal practice, loans are secured against assets.
I mean, I think there's two things really. In terms of lending, there's the risk of default, and that we will address by ensuring that the loans from Hampshire Community Bank are secured on companies that are of good credit quality. I mean, the other aspect is the consequences if there is a default, and that's where the security comes in. Hampshire Community Bank will seek to secure their loans on personal guarantees which provide a degree of security, although I'd accept that it's not as good as a charge on fixed assets. Having said that, we have also mitigated it to some extent by reducing the duration of loans to Hampshire Community Bank, which means that obviously there's less time for things to go wrong with people we've lent to.
A question which I think is probably towards Peter Boff rather than to you, concerning that. If it is secured on counterparties rather than secured on assets, is there a legal difference in what we consider to be security there, and is this of consequence to us?
Fixed assets are always a better security for any form of lending, in the sense that you could charge a property or you could secure a registration against the land registry title to that property. That's your premier form of security. Personal guarantee is only worth as much as the person to whom the guarantee is either given or received, in the sense that the guarantor may be a person of straw. But they can, obviously subject to credit checks, be checked to see whether they've got any pedigree to be able to deal with that guarantee. But they're not giving a fixed value asset security.
So it can be legally considered to be a security. It can be secured.
Yes, personal guarantees are quite common, and there's a sort of perception it's always in a sort of peripheral lending environment. It's not. They're quite common within a commercial world to give personal guarantees for companies, for personal loans relevant to business.
Thank you.
Any other questions, members? Okay, can we now agree the recommendations ranging from 31A to 31K? Is that agreed? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Item 6, External Auditors 1920 Audit Plan.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I start talking about the detail of the audit plan, I would like to talk to you about the timing of the audit, if I may, and the wider audit market. And this is following a number of discussions that we've had with officers within the Council and with the Chairman of this committee as well. So, members are probably going to be well aware that the audit profession has been under significant scrutiny over the last year or so, both from a corporate and a public sector point of view, and there have been a number of reviews into the audit profession. And there's been an increasing focus by our regulator on delivering a quality audit and making sure we have the right team at the right time to deliver the right work. There have been numerous discussions, particularly within the local government audit market, about what this means. And to give you some context, at the beginning of February this year, there were still 85 audits that had not completed their 18-19 audit. Now, some of those, the large number of those at this point are probably because of issues within the clients, but there were also delays all the way through the summer because audit firms did not have the right staff in place, and that's something that we as a firm have also struggled with. Audit is not a particularly attractive profession at the moment necessarily because of the pressures that I referred to. So there's been a number of discussions about how we deliver the audits, and indeed discussions about what the deadline really is for delivering the audit for the year. And one of the things that I think has become much clearer, both to the audit firms and more importantly to local government bodies and all of the other different bodies that are involved in the public sector audit environment, is that the 31st of July deadline is not a deadline for the audit, it's a deadline for publishing a set of financial statements, the narrative statement, the annual governance statement on the website, with or without an opinion, and with an explanation as to why it's not been delivered. And that might be because there's been a decision to delay the audit and schedule it to a different part of the year. It might be because there are actually problems in delivering that. The reason why I've given you that background is that we have been looking at how we can deliver our audits from the Southampton office, which includes Portsmouth, for this coming July. And our concern has been that whilst we have got a significant increase in our staff, a number of them have joined us at the start of this year, and we've still got to get them up to speed in terms of understanding the market so that they don't ask stupid questions of your staff, and being in the right place at the right time to deliver that. And we just still don't have the quantum of staff. We've therefore been looking at our options, and I think what I would say is that we are very grateful to officers here for at least starting to talk to us about whether the audit for Portsmouth City Council is one that we could schedule to later in the year. So that means that we would be scheduling the audit outside of the peak period of June and July and into a period that works better for us, but also importantly works for officers here. And I think the most important thing I should say at this point is that this is in no way a reflection of the quality of the financial statements that are produced by the finance team, the quality of the officers that you have, or the quality of the support that we get. This is, I think probably the best way of describing it is a mutually agreed position which we have requested, at least consideration of. And our proposal is that we will complete our interim audit and our planning work and our interim audit in the same way that we always will. So that work is ongoing. We will make sure that we have an agreed plan with officers to deliver the work and to use the time that is available in the June and July period from the teams that are set up to deliver and work with us, and that we will then look at scheduling the audit for in the period, and I'm giving you a wide period at this stage of sort of from end of August, September-ish through to October. The detail of that is being worked through, working around people's leave, working around other commitments that your finance team will have. And I wanted to put that context first before we start talking about the risks in the plan, because there are new risks in our audit plan this year that I'm sure we will come on to in a moment. But it's within the context of delivering this at a slightly different point. This does not result in any reputational impact for the council. It does not result in anybody writing to you to say that there is a problem here. And as I said, it is absolutely no reflection on the quality of the work that is and the information that's provided to us. But it is something that we are truly very grateful to Julian, to Michael and the rest of the finance team for working with us on. We discussed this with the chairman this afternoon and reassured him on the key points that it doesn't result in a reputational risk. So if I pause for a moment and just take any questions that you might have on that, and then perhaps, Chairman, we can just go through the actual changes to the risks.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And I did have a meeting with Julian and Michael and yourselves about an hour ago, I think, to put this to me. I have no problems with it, as long as it's legal, which I'm sure it is, and it's above board, and it just gives a bit more time for people to get work done properly. There will be a report. I don't know who's going to be on governance and audit next year, but there will be a report to the autumn meeting anyway in November. Julian and people will make sure that meetings are scheduled to have a report from yourselves anyway in the autumn of next year. But any comments, members?
Neil, I suppose this is more an observation. I don't have a concern as such, but this will mean that the report won't be coming to this committee until what? If it's completed by October, it won't come till the November meeting. Does that create a issue in that there may be risks which we will be halfway through the year and weren't have been identified? And that may then have a issue on the budget, etc. So that's sort of a question and a point as well.
It's a very good question and a very good point to make. I think probably the risk that I would most focus on within the report, or that there are two areas. One around PPE valuation, and then the specific risk that we've identified around the lakeside valuation. Both of those areas are areas where I think I'm right in saying, David, that we are focusing on as part of our interim audits that we're carrying out now. So I think if we had any specific concerns over the way in which those two elements have been handled, they are the ones that are most likely, I think, then to have an impact onto next year's budget setting and how that would work. And I think the other thing I would say in reassurance is it doesn't mean that we are not going to be here and doing work and keeping in contact. One of the elements of this is absolutely to work alongside your officers and to keep in contact from now through until the point at which we complete. Just in terms of the timing of bringing the audit report, I think that is something that we would want to discuss probably through Democratic Services in terms of how would it make sense for the meetings that are usually planned, I think, in September and November to work to ensure that the right information is coming at the right time. I hope that...
It does. I suppose my concern is anything that comes left field. If there's anything, you've identified some risks that are in here, and obviously there will be interim audits as part of that. I suppose it's just those things that if we're not getting that till the middle of the year, will there be, if there's something that hasn't been considered before, will it have a budgetary risk? And I just raise it.
I think it's something that we will reflect on in terms of how can we make sure that if there is something like that, that we, if there is anything that comes to our attention that we feel you should know, we would bring that to your attention. And that is something that we would always do. In terms of the risks within the plan, I think they are well known to the council and it's areas that are already being focused on. So the point of how it might reflect on, trying to get my years right, 2020, 21, we might need to just think on that a bit more. But in terms of our regular interaction with the council, I would expect that if there was something that was starting to come up and emerge, we would raise that.
Thank you very much, Neil. Okay, so item 6.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask David just to highlight. I'm going to assume that everybody has read the report and we will just focus on the areas that have perhaps changed from our assessment from last year, and then happy to take any comments or questions that members may have.
Thank you. So as Helen says, a number of the risks in the plan this year are common with the prior year. The risks are set out in summary on pages 33 to 35, and then in greater detail from page 39 onwards. If I go to page 39, the first two significant risks identified are consistent with the prior year, and those are the two fraud risks which we are required to identify under ISA 240. The one significant risk which is new for 1920 is the one that's already been touched on around the valuation of the lakeside assets. Obviously a significant new acquisition in the year, and we will be involving our specialist on our side to help us with the review of the valuation of the assets at Lakeside. That process is already underway, as Helen said, and we are aiming to make as much progress on that as we can at the interim visit, depending on the final approach that the Council takes to that valuation. From page 42 onwards are what we would designate areas of audit focus. So these are areas where there is a higher inherent risk, but they're not considered to be significant risks to the audit. The first three, valuation of land and buildings, PFI accounting, and pension liability valuation, are consistent with the prior year. IFRS 16 leases on page 44 is new for 1920. This is an accounting standard which the Council and all other local government bodies will be required to implement in full from 2020-21. For 2019-20, the Council needs to consider what the impact of the new standard will be and make a disclosure of that in one of the disclosure notes in its statement of accounts. We are aware from discussions with officers that the Council is making preparations for that, in assessing the completeness of its leases information and then making assessments of how those leases need to be treated under the new standard. And again, this is an area where we will make whatever progress we possibly can at the interim stage. Then on page 45, the area of focus around a minimum revenue provision, or MRP, is consistent with the prior year. We had a review undertaken by our specialist in 2017-18/18-19, which we can use to provide us with the bulk of the assurance there, and we'll just update those considerations for 1920. The restatement of the CIS and EFA is new for this year. The Council has changed its internal reporting structures and therefore, under the CIPFA code requirements, needs to represent its CIS and EFA in line with those new portfolio headings. And what that means then is that both the current and prior year figures will need to be presented per those headings, which means that the prior year figures are restated in line with the new portfolios. So we will be required to look at that. And then the final one on that page is the group accounts assessment. We need to look each year at the Council's assessment of any subsidiary companies and whether or not it's required to produce group accounts. And so that's something that we've asked the Council to refresh its assessment, which they do, which officers do every year, and we will review that as part of the audit. The final area of focus is on page 46, which is more really an awareness item as much as anything that will impact directly on the current year, which is that there have been some changes to what auditors are required to do with respect to the application of the going concern assumption. And this is really just something that we're highlighting that we will need to be doing greater work on in future years as a result of that change in the standard. The only other risk then is to the value for money conclusion, and that is on page 49. Again, this is linked to the purchase of Lakeside, but this is looking at it from a different standpoint than the work that is necessary for the financial statements audit. And here we will be considering the arrangements that the Council has had in place to support the decision that was taken to make that purchase. And we've highlighted there on the right-hand side the kind of key considerations that we will be looking at for the value for money conclusion in relation to Lakeside.
think that's probably all we wanted to say, Chairman. Happy to take any comments or questions that members may have on the remainder of the report or on those specific issues.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. Thank you, David. Any questions, members? Hugh, please.
It struck me in reading this, page 44, that, page 44, yes, IFRS 16, that the code has not been published. Are we sufficiently flexible that if the code is published, we can take it up, or anything which is has not been leaked to us, take this up with rapidity? And will it cause us any problems?
I don't think it will. The code for the current year is published, and our understanding from our discussions with officers is that the right things are being done to prepare for the introduction of IFRS 16. We had early sight of a paper setting out the council's approach, both to assessing the completeness of its leases and to considering some of the key aspects of IFRS 16 around leases that might be exempted based on their value, for instance. And so we've had sight of the council's intended approach to those. So there's nothing of which we are currently aware that the council isn't making preparations for.
Any other members? Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Is there any recommendations on this? I don't think there are. Just to note. Okay, members, that's just a note. Thank you. Right. Item 7, corporate complaints. Thank you. You'll see from the last set of minutes we wanted more detailed information on the complaints themselves, which have been provided. So that's this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as you said, we brought the annual complaints report in September, and there was a request from members for additional information around the local government ombudsman complaints. So we've prepared a report giving you that additional information. As there were 8 upheld complaints, 4 of which were corporate complaints and 4 of which were related to adults and children's social care. Natalie Beckett, who's the complaints manager for adults and children's social care, has joined us in anticipation of any additional questions that you might have. And Karen Fitzgerald is our corporate complaints officer, so will also be able to assist with any questions. I think the committee were interested in whether or not there was any pattern to the complaints, and whether there were any teams or areas of the council that were coming up repeatedly, and to get a better sense of that kind of picture. I hope the additional information really does clarify that it is actually, there are complaints across the organisation, and they're on a variety of different subjects and areas, and I think the committee wanted to get a sense of the kind of remedial action that had been taken or the learning from the complaints, and hopefully the report gives you a sense of that. But there's an awful lot of areas where there's enhanced staff training or guidance for staff about changes to processes, and some changes in adult social care around the ways that safeguarding is managed, those kinds of things. So hopefully that gives you a sort of fuller picture, but we're happy to take any questions.
Yeah, can I thank you very much. Thank you for the report itself as well. And I presume in future we'll have, this will be the type of report we will get with a bit more information on it. Thank you. Members, any questions?
It was just really an observation. I mean, I think having, and I know you have, Chair, as well, been in a position where there are children's safeguarding or adult safeguarding position as a cabinet member, I think there is always lack of communication. It always seems to kind of rear its head, and I think that that's partly because people don't want to listen to the information that's being given, but also I think that because of the fact that we're working with such a variety of people, we do need to make sure that we are simplifying some of the messages, because sometimes I think that it's so complicated that people do complain because they don't necessarily understand. That's just really an observation.
Thank you. Okay, members? Okay. Thank you very much for the report, and thank you for the update. Thank you. Okay, item 8 is members' training report. It's got information only on it, but I don't know if that makes any difference. But are you doing this, Peter? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You have in front of you basically an information report just saying what training is available to all members. It's a sort of non-compulsory scheme for you. You can dip in and dip out of it as you see fit. It is a wide and expansive training offer this year. I suppose it's a matter entirely for you as members how you wish to orchestrate your own training as members of any particular political group. I don't vouchsafe for the fact that you do any training at all. It's just provided for you. Obviously, as I say, it's a matter for you, but it's there available for members to access.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah. Any point information? It's you. Did you want to?
My only comment is a certain concern, page 113. In 2019, only 5 members attended licensing committee training. Now, that is a statutory committee. And is there any reason why that you can think of why it was such a low number of members of that committee who attended the training?
I think, Councillor Mason, the truth of it is there's quite a good cohort for licensing. We don't have difficulty in filling it. Essentially, 5 members and all standing deputies can cover it. The truth of it is they've never complained to me that they're short. There have been periods of time when there's been a real paucity, but recently there hasn't been.
Okay, so there is no shortage of members who are trained,
who are
available
trained,
to do the work. Okay, thank you.
I have to say I'm a member of the licensing committee, and I've been to every training bit since 2016 or whatever, and it's the same every year. But nonetheless, I turn up. Okay. It's not compulsory, this bit. Licensing is not compulsory, is that right? Yes and no.
It isn't compulsory, but it is compulsory in a sense. In a sense, we won't have you sit on unless you've done the training, really. To be honest with you.
All right, Jack.
We congratulate you on that, Chairman.
Thank you, yeah, sure. Okay.
Dave Patel, yeah.
What I've said, and I keep saying it, is that it's really down to group leaders to push training for members and speak within their groups or whatever, or group leaders meetings or whatever they do these days, because I think it is important, and particularly ones of these. I mean, 10 people turn up to planning, which is good, I suspect, but other ones you're absolutely right. But I think the important thing is that the training is offered, and members will or will not take it up depending how they feel about it, except the compulsory bits, of course.
Quick question. Is the planning one compulsory as well if you're going to be a member of the committee? Is that one you're required to do?
In effect, yeah.
Yeah. And also if you're involved in interview panels for senior officers, you also have to do training for that, don't you?
In effect, you're right.
Yeah.
Good point, Graham, and I think group leaders at this stage should be reminded of that, because there'll be a new batch of people coming in May, and I think, particularly, and to be fair, certainly with licensing, they hold the training as soon as they can after the local election.
Chair, we had, as you know, at the pre-meeting confirmation that we've been out to recruitment for additional independent members. As you know, we had a caucus of 3, one of whom retired last year. We're down to a caucus of 2, who will have served their full terms by probably have done so already. So we've been out to recruit 2. I can say to you that we have Mr. Mark Walsh and Mr. John Young as potential appointees. The third candidate who applied was equally as good, but put on reserve on the basis that these were the 2 that we could use. They all reached a normative standard of competency and engagement that you would be satisfied to have any of them as independent persons. Thank you.
And as you see, this report goes on to full council anyway, or for noting Labour. Please.
I'll just make one point, and I don't know whether it's here or where. There's no thanks to the outgoing independent persons. It just seems some.
Sorry, Councillor. They're not gone yet.
They're not gone yet. So
They will be. Well said.
As I said, that the appointment of independent persons goes on to full council. Item 10, which is the performance management update, quarter 2, 2019-2020.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the regular report that comes to the committee. This is the second report that's been received in this format. You may recall that previous discussions took place about how might we make it a bit more accessible in terms of focusing the information, presenting it more graphically, which we've tried to do. You'll see in front of you there's the general report and then 3 appendices. One is the summary from directors of the key issues within the directorates and their priorities. The second appendix is the summary of performance against key KPIs for the directorates, and the third appendix is the report on projects of significance that are taking place. These things are grouped under the kind of organisational priorities to try and give them some kind of structure. Happy to take any particular questions on any of those areas performance highlighted. Obviously, if I don't know the answer to those, I'll take them away and come back to the committee as usual. Just leave it at that.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. Any questions, members? Points? Graham, please.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at page 135, I just want to clarify the CQC service ratings. We talk about nursing homes, residential, domiciliary and community. The community is the one that's red, and I'm not quite sure what you include within that, because what's included within the community element?
That's an area that I'll need to go and get the detail from the relevant staff member, so I'll come back to you swiftly on that.
Okay, members, any other points, questions?
A passing comment, page 144. I am pleased to see the success of the enterprise centres and note the high demand for small affordable workspace in the right location. And I think that it might be useful for us to note that for taking to the relevant cabinet member, because there's clearly a greater demand than we can supply at the present time, but it is something which is of considerable value to this city.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Hugh. Will you pass that message on? Thank you. Thank you.
No, most of the others I think we know about.
Yeah, we've been through this many
Yep.
times. Well, thank you for the report, and thank you for the report not being... We're cutting down the number of trees, aren't we? That, I can remember these reports used to be fairly, that's right. No, thanks for that, and the information is still as valuable. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Kelly. Now, nothing there, is there? I don't have to ask. Oh, note the report on the revised format and agree if any further action is required in response to performance issues. You will take up that point. Thank you very much. Okay, item 11, Code of Conduct Report on Social Media. Are you doing this, Peter?
Yeah. Chair, you'll see in front of you a report to you recommending a change to the Employees Code of Conduct as part of the Constitution to reflect the interaction and necessity to look at matters in terms of social media. Page 167 deals with the narrative text in the sense of what currently exists and what is suggested as an appropriate addendum to essentially indicate to our colleagues and the employed officership that there are obligations relevant to their behaviours when using and accessing social media. This is reflective of the common law position as to behaviours of an employee within the construct of the employee-employer relationship, and puts things on a sensible footing, hence why it's incorporated into the Constitution. By implication, it would form an implied term, in my view, as an employment lawyer, within the construct of their employee-employer contract, to behave in such a way as to reflect those behaviours as espoused by the authority.
As you see, this goes on to full council on the 17th of March, anyway. Any points of comment, Hugh, please?
It would be useful if you came back to us in a year or so to tell us how this new Section 16 is working out in practice. Quite clearly, we're feeling our way forward in this area because this area is changing the whole time, and it'd be useful to know how well it's doing.
Yes, that's fine. Happy to do that.
Neil?
Can I just ask, how are you monitoring this? I mean, in principle, obviously, comfortable with what's being written, but the reality is that it's great to have something on paper, but how are we monitoring it?
I don't think we are monitoring it. We're just saying to the staff and members of the officership that it exists per policy, and that, you're obliged within the construct of the employee-employer relationship to look at what your employer could reasonably expect you to do by way of direct instruction or by implication. Now, how you act on a social platform or media platform is a matter of judgment, but it can also impact in terms of the employee-employer relationship. Now, that may come to me as part of a disciplinary or some form of employee-employer relationship claim, but the argument is the policy exists, it's an implied term, no doubt the argument would be it's implied into your contract, that you should comply with the terms reasonably put forward by way of policy from the employer.
Okay, can we note there are 3 recommendations there? Can we note those, members? And this is a note also is off to full council on the 17th of March. Okay, thank you. Item 12, gifts and hospitality report, officers and members.
Thank you, Chair. It's me again. This is the standard report that comes to you every year. There have been no declarations that cause me any difficulties this year in terms of compliance with regard to hospitality. I'm happy to take questions in respect to pages 187 to 197 and the back thereof in respect of any particular declarations made by officers and or members relevant to gifts and hospitality. I think the sort of common theme coming through is that financial rewards as offered are being dealt with appropriately. Those that are accepted on the basis of essentially going to the Lord Mayor's Charity Fund, and or some of the more, shall we say, interesting ones, for example, food, are being eaten on the basis that there is an entry there that reflects that the cheese bites look quite nice, which I thought was a nice declaration for a gift of 30 quid. So there are a lot of entries, and I think the basic message of good practice is that there is nothing that would cause me difficulty in terms of quantum or reason, really. It's a sort of thing you would expect in an organisation of this sort of structure. So unless you have got any direct questions on any of them, the policy is a report, really.
Okay, thank you, Peter. As I always say in this report, it's the ones that aren't reported that could well worry us, but there you are. I mean, I think people are above board and letting us know what they're doing. Members particularly, is this the first time members been in it, Peter, or has it been before? It seems the first time to me. It's the first time for members, yeah. I have to say, on my day, I got a lot more invites than the Connecticut got. But however, please.
Yes, I think I remember in my days as well, we used to get invites to housing conferences to go to dinners and conditionals, and we never declared an interest on that at all, as far as I remember. Is the register published somewhere else other than in the report here? I mean, is it available on the council website to have a look at, like the members' allowances is, or not? Because it says it's a register, but is it published in anywhere else, just out of interest?
It's essentially kept by me.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, right. So you can't sort of go on the council website and look for it. You have to come to you for a request.
Yeah. I can interrogate it down. Yeah.
Is that right? Okay. Right. And the period of this one covers from, I see it's from 2018.
You can see the report, though.
Sorry?
You can see the report, right?
You can see the report.
Yeah.
And the period covered is October to October. That's the normal sort of period, roughly. Yeah. Okay.
Just a comment on page 197 that I was very pleased to see that the case of 12 bottles of champagne was distributed between the receiving office and the loaders, so that everybody got a bit of it.
Any other points? So to note. Okay, so is that to be noted? I'm back to that. Yeah, can we note the report then?
Noted.
Thank you. Right, item 13. Sorry, really. Item 13, report on complaints received in conjunction with alleged code of conduct breaches. Again, that's you, Peter, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Page 209 of your bundle, members. The previous last year's code of conduct were pretty mundane in the sense there was nothing terribly exciting about any of them. None of them went through to fruition. There was an early space in sort of January to sort of April, and things tailed off after April until today, when I have some more on the chalk, so to speak, but until then, virtually nothing. Again, they seem to emanate from behaviours relevant to social media and reporting platforms and usage. Fortunately, none of them were such that they required getting beyond the initial filtering stage.
Any comment, members? Any points on this? No. Graham, could you? Graham?
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Sorry, public. Constitution, Part 2, Sections 5A, B and C. I have to say, when I was re-elected in 2016, Peter gave me the Constitution telling me not to worry about it, it was all out of date, and I'd get a new copy that autumn, right? I've been plaguing it. It's not the be-all and end-all, but I mean, it's something that we need to do, and so now we've got some bits of it, Peter, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping first. There will be a couple of changes to it as we go along.
They've been circulated, haven't they?
Yeah.
Neil, have you got a copy of that? Yeah. Just the last bit of paper. Okay.
Yeah, you should have a sort of a...
Just handed it to you.
Yeah.
Just.
So the basic plan was that we're going to do tranches of it and hand it to you, take it to full council. This is the first tranche that's gone forward. The good news is that there has been a good level of engagement. If you look at Appendix 2, you'll see that the relevant officers and statutory officers have all engaged. And whilst I don't intend to name or shame any of them, some of them are slightly adrift, but most of them have done all that was necessary for this particular section. So the plan is that we'll move on to the next section and bring it back to gas in an appropriate way. This is the first tranche. So I'm just going to skip through it as we go, and I'll take questions from any of you members as we go, if you would want me to do that. So I'm looking at Appendix 1, Chief Officer's Delegated Authority. There's one amendment there. Yep, the next page you should see Section 5A. There has been some amendments to that, in the sense that you'll note that an officer may escalate to you decision making that he or she takes a view needs to be shared with you, i.e. all 42 members. And at the bottom of the page, sorry, halfway down the page, you'll see the following powers are delegated subject to MIS provisions above, which requires the officership to escalate to you certain reserved matters in essence. Okay? So 1A is virtually as used to be. 1B is virtually the same except a slight change. Director of Regeneration on the next page, there's a substantial change there. A and B are the old E and F. Highway and Housing, virtually no change. 3, myself, limited change. 4, no change. 5, no limited change. Colleagues, anything on that particular section relevant to MIS? 5 1B is just a page. Scheme of Delegations Officers Overview. There's a couple on there. There's some substantial ones relevant to the Shareholder Committee Protocol, which we went through in order to deal with things like membership of Ravelin and the overview shareholder committee structure, which is why it is now reflected in page 3. Go on to the next page. It's got miscellaneous. There's a couple of amendments. 6 is slightly changed. 7, 8, 9, 10 on page 5, which is just the miscellaneous sections. Emergencies, continuities, none. Conjoint delegations, that's just changing the words. Next page, it's all limited change, except a referral back to me, and purchase of a lease relevant to 100,000. 8 is different. Chief Executive consultation is slightly amended on page 7. Chief Executive is just a name change. City Solicitor taking out Michael's previous title. Slight syntax changes from me. 17 is a new one for me in respect of covenants that are no longer applicable. Next one, Directors of Finance. This is changed quite substantially to reflect that the Section 151 officer is inherited through a restructuring elements of portfolio that used to live with Louise Wild as relevant to benefits and certain types of payments for non-domestic rates and council tax, hence why he's got a big trench on his first page. Next page is just rejigging the internal audit page. There is a specific one there to the Chief Auditor at the bottom with regard to paragraph 24. That's one for you. IS functions have been moved because they've been moved out of that directorate. Procurement function is just changed the numbering. Council taxes in addition, as I say, relevant to Lou Wilders. Everything on the back page is again an additional. Director of Corporate Services, minor changes there in terms of description and titling. Ditto the next page. There are some removals in respect of the final page with regard to suspected dishonesty. Then there's the IS function that's being parked in with her new directorship, as along with democratic services, freedom of information, corporate complaints, and the taking out of all the council stuff, tax stuff that goes to Christopher, as along with revenues and benefits. Election services always comes into that, so does community engagement. The one that I'm specifically asked to put to your attention is on the final page about trading and recovery of costs. There is a commitment by the authority to recognise the public sector equality duty, and that has been espoused as part of her specific delegation. So that's a new one for you. Director of Property and Housing. Here there is a delineation by James in respect of HRA and General Housing Fund. So he's delineated all the way through his delegations what is meant by HRI or General Housing Fund. And the reason for that is to not mix up the concept of land or property with regeneration. It's essentially a syntax change. His delegations are the same. He's taken out some relevant to mortgages, which have moved elsewhere. Housing property management, as you would expect, remains, as do most of them. He's taken out some of the housing standard stuff. He's tidied up his timings and elements relevant to approval and telecare, things like that. They go elsewhere. And he's put in a very nice chart of his statutory obligations for you to look at, which aren't substantially different from the ones you have seen before. The rest of it is number changes and syntax changes and withdrawals. There's changes relevant to things like dog fouling fines and statutory fines relevant to offences. Next one, Director of Regeneration. There are substantial changes in here, not on the front page but on the second page. What I'd say to you is look at your rider and you'll see there to be tabled today, Tuesday the 3rd of March, supplementary changes to item 14, Constitution Part 2, Section 5A, B and C. What Tom's done is taken out in paragraph 1 the word agree and is put there grant, in the sense of granting a lease as opposed to agree. In respect of 4, to serve notices, he's taken out Part 2 of the Landlord and Tenant Act. In respect of 7, he's taken out after consultation with the appropriate chief officer, and he's put in there, which you haven't seen but you see on your rider, in line with the current policy. Now the reason he put that in is the policy is going to Cabinet on the 10th of March. In the unlikely event that that policy is not accepted by the Cabinet, I will obviously amend the Constitution to reflect that. But bearing in mind it's unlikely to be, we have taken the view that we're going to give you the amendment to the Constitution now. So it will now say, in line with the current policy, which is yet to be promulgated, which is an interesting way of doing it, but it's to try and make things slightly more efficient. In respect of 11, he's amended that to read instead, to place orders for planned and reactive maintenance, including emergency works, to council-owned buildings with structure and land. 12, 13, 14 are all new amendments. Mortgages is back here as opposed to where it was previously, so it's now with Regen. Transport's the same, everything else is the same, so subject to numbers. For the next 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages. General matters have been changed by the Assistant Director of Planning to give more and focus specific delegations to him, which is 50 onwards to 57, down to 62. Thereafter, he's put in a standard catch-all essential clause relevant to everything that one would expect a planning directorate and a planning arm to do of an authority. So that's new within it, within regeneration land, within planning land, so to speak. 50 onwards are scrubbed. We've left it in there to see what's come out of the amended, so you've got an idea of why you've got a very long paragraph and why you've got after that a lot of deletions, because they are superfluous and OTO's the large paragraph. Okay. Director of Culture, A and B are the new additions. The rest of it is just taking minor things out. Lord Mayor's Office is just numbering a minor amendment. Director of Adult Social Services and Care, its title. Director of Children's Services, it's a slight amendment in title, and an authority to give slightly higher ex gratia payments for injuries to young persons and children within the care, subject to anything higher coming to myself. Yeah. The rest of it is syntax and numbering. Director of Public Health has no changes whatsoever to make, which I think is interesting, but there you go. Director of Port is put a little bit in there about regeneration and relationship, and that's it. That's the first tranche of amendments as promised to Leo many years ago.
Many years ago, it's so exciting. They talk about nothing else in the pubs in North End, you know that, don't you? So I can tell them it's now out and amended. This will go to, I understand you say it'll go to Cabinet first, or will just those amendments? Yeah, I suppose it's the whole lot, and the amendment that you're going to put will go to Cabinet, and then on to Council. Okay. When can we expect the rest? The whole lot?
Oh, no, this lot.
Yeah, this lot, yeah.
This lot, this first tranche.
Okay. Well, it's very exciting, isn't it? It is. Any questions? Points? No. Okay.
Better than Horlicks.
Oh, yeah. You're right. A tidying up bit more than anything else. Okay, members? Thank you. I keep forgetting to put this. Right, 15 is a proposed revision to Standing Order 32, referral of motions to other bodies of the Council. Peter's going to deal with this, but in effect, it's to say to discuss every notice of motion that we receive at the Council where it's received.
It's essentially to remove merely that deletion of the first sentence. motions including the agenda must be formally moved and seconded. It's not anything more than that. I don't know where it's come from, but it's been put to me as a bit of a tidying up exercise with regard to standing orders, and I have no difficulty with it, on the basis that it's hardly ever used, I'm reliably informed. Unless somebody tells me the contrary, I'll take that as read.
Okay, members. Again, this is on the full council. Okay. 15 then, so we'll recommend this change to Standing Order 32 from this body. Okay, thank you. Item 16, data security breaches. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think this in the next one is also to confirm that you are now dealing, internal audit now have these responsibilities, or you have, Liz, haven't you? So that's really what it's saying, and then I'll put it up. Sorry, carry on.
It is. So on the departure of Michael, I inherited the Senior Information Responsible Officer, which means any of the data breaches would at some stage come in my direction. It's still held within the part of the kind of complaints and FOI and GDPR, so it's Helen Maggery and her team. But if they have a breach, they enact various actions, and it may be that it is for the relevant directorate to actually follow through and so forth. And obviously we're bringing to your attention, and we do this on an annual basis, any particular breaches that we may have had. You will have noted perhaps today that there was an article in the press in relation to our breach, which is contained within this report, which occurred last November. But it is to update you that it's obviously changed hands, and to bring you the annual report basically saying this is the breaches that we have had to date, and whether you had any concerns or issues you wanted to raise.
Liz. Councillor Norton, can I ask you if you have any declarations of interest?
No, Chair, thank you, and apologies for my lateness. I'm standing in for Councillor Bosher on the agreement that I...
We had that note earlier on, but thank you. We are now on item 16. Okay, thank you. You, please.
Briefly. Looking at the table, I see that virtually nothing was informed to the ICO. Who takes the decision whether the ICO should be informed, and what criteria do they use?
They use a criteria and an assessment around risk and harm. It is an initial assessment to which the team that receive the information, i.e. Helen Maggery's team, will assess. They would report then to the CSIRO, so it'll either be when it was Michael's tenure or it will be myself. They will recommend whether it should go and be reported to ICO. It is, as I said, based on an assessment, and it's also based on what our expectations would be in relation to the ICO. So if in doubt, we will report. Portsmouth City Council was very good at putting its head above the parapet and reporting and liaising with the ICO. But ultimately, at the moment, it would come in my direction.
So the ICO is quite content with the way in which we are operating at the present time?
They will review each case in isolation that is referred to them, and if they require any further information, they will actually ask us to undertake further work. I am not aware of that actually occurring, but they are more concerned around whether we have underlying issues, whether we have a sound framework, and whether we can take reasonable steps to make certain that things like this don't happen again. Can I add, in relation to the format of the table and the content of the information that has been presented, I would like to perhaps revisit how we present this information, and maybe it would be of use perhaps for you to have greater transparency over a particular directorate that might have more breaches than perhaps some others, and what we're planning to do in relation to those breaches.
You did mention you don't want to expand the report itself. Yeah.
I think it's more about not necessarily the contents, but it is what we're telling you and whether there is any underlying problems and issues, as opposed to perhaps its current. But I'm going to do that in consultation with Helen Maggery and her team and perhaps yourself, Chair, as to what may be useful information coming forward.
Okay, thank you, Neil.
The report obviously details what's happened in 2019 or 2019-2020. How does this compare to this time, the same period last year? And I suppose from my perspective is if we're having, there's quite a lot here on data breaches, but if you compare it to last year, I kind of want some reassurance that lessons are being learnt year on year. I appreciate that emails will be sent to the wrong person, and that is what it is, and human error it will always play a part. But I kind of want reassurance that we are learning year on year from the mistakes that are made with data breach.
I would agree wholeheartedly with you. I don't have the data in relation to comparison, but I actually think that's the nature of data that would be helpful for you moving forward, along with perhaps more expansive narrative around the lessons to learn, because from an audit perspective it would cause me concern. I know I have the CSIRO role as well, that if some directorates, if there are some pockets where we don't seem to be able to move on, but I'd like the clarity and the transparency around that to be able to perhaps tease out if we need to take additional steps.
Okay, members. Thank you, Liz. Oh, sorry, Hugh, you okay? Yeah, thank you. That's just to note that report. That's okay, thank you. So item 17 is whistleblowing report. Again, you now have the responsibility for it. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, so in relation to whistleblowing, we've had a couple of amendments in relation to Michael ultimately was the responsible party. Audit have always been heavily involved, but it is to bring to your attention, obviously, the whistleblowing cases, and there's been only a few, but it's also to bring back through to you the minor amendments to the policy. So we would expect, certainly moving forward, that Peter would be involved and that there is an avenue that if any individual wants to blow the whistle that they can do so via Peter. Obviously Paul is now more involved now that I'm taking more responsibility in relation to the policy. But it's to bring forward the minor changes and the 3 incidences that we have had.
Okay, members. Liz, I did bring up this point because a couple of staff brought it up with me recently. Some staff are concerned that if they are whistleblowers, genuine whistleblowers, that they may well be discriminated against by management and the City Council. So how do you ensure that that doesn't happen? And if a member of staff is a whistleblower, genuine, can you make arrangements to make sure that they're incognito or whatever, or been viewed? How would you intend to proceed? Because some people have felt that that they give me stories about whistleblowers where the word has got out, if you like, that they're whistleblowers, and they've been sort of shunned in some way.
We've historically, so maybe we could have a conversation external to this, but we've historically had a reasonably good track record with when whistleblowers have come forward. We are happy to maintain their anonymity. It is made clear that if a case was to progress to the police, and we may need to share the detail, but what we would do, because inevitably most of these hit audit before they hit anybody else, or they may come into the chief exec who will pass them straight over. So We'll sit down with an individual to give as much assurance as possible, and I've actually historically had cases where it has only been myself that has known the name and the details of the individual, to try and encourage people to have that confidence moving forward. I'm not aware of any particular cases where somebody has raised something and there has been ramifications, and I know from recollection there has only been one incident I can think of where it was deemed that it was raised maliciously. But we will treat them with anonymity as far as we can go, but always have the dialogue with them to say and set that scene. If we need to divulge, it won't be until we've made that clear to the individual. And on some occasions, it's only me that knows the contact details.
Okay, thank you. Any points or questions, members? Can we note that report then? Thank you. So that's, well, to note the report. Thank you. We decided earlier on not to go into the exempt if we can avoid it, is that right? So do I still need to move exclusion of press and public? I don't know. No, so I don't need to do 18. But if people stray, I might have to. Okay, thank you. Right, so I'm not moving the I'm moving on to item, before I go back on my, what is it? Item 19 then, the audit performance status report to 29 January 2020.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So the audit performance report is the usual report that we bring to you, where we will present audit completed to date, and we would obviously give you any update on any particular areas that is causing us concern. So we should have contained within here the home to school transport, for example, which was ongoing last year. That has moved significantly in the right direction, and we're able to give reasonable assurance. Because it has caused some concerns and there's been various conversations, it is a review that is back in the plan, and I'm proposing for it to be in the plan for 2021, so that we can give some assurances that what has been put in place remains in place moving forward. So the plan is in progress. The hire car follow-up as well that we had undertaken, again, that has moved significantly in a good direction. There is only one area of concern that we do need to bring to your attention, but that is in an exempt paper, and we're on track to complete everything that we need to in order to give the annual opinion. And I think finally we've also got attached in here our proposed plan for 2021, which we would need ratification from yourself. So I'm happy to take any queries if you have any queries regarding the content.
Well, thank you, Liz, for that. Any points, members? Any questions? Hugh, please.
Thank you for the detail. It's very useful to have it. Some bits give me a considerable amount of interest, and it is very interesting to read through the various sections, noting that the Section 6 suppliers paid over £100,000. The Roman Catholic Diocese was paid for £150,000. I shall ask the chairman what that was about. But page 317, I am slightly concerned to see that three waivers were on grounds of...
Sorry, Councillor, that is a different report.
Whoops.
Sorry, Hugh, you jumped on.
I jumped on.
It's all the pages stuck.
Right, I've jumped on to... right, sorry. My apologies. That's item 20, is it?
They're easy ones, Hugh.
Yes, sorry. My apologies, Chairman.
Nothing on this?
Nothing on 19, no.
Okay, thank you very much then. Can we, I'm getting lost here. Can we note the report or whatever we have to do with it? Members note the audit performance for 1920, note the highlighted areas of concern and endorse the plan. Is that agreed, members? Okay, thank you very much. Greg, thank you for covering it. We're now on to 20, which is procurement management information.
Okay.
Somebody was in standby to come to, no, right, earlier on. Yeah, for this report.
It is. So there's
Yeah.
2 oranges.
So we decided not
Right.
to venture into these, but members, if they've got any questions, may write to you.
Okay.
Okay. We didn't want somebody hanging about for hours. We're very generous in this committee, Greg, as you well know. Okay. So I'll pass it up to you.
Brilliant. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do is introduce the gentleman to the left of me. This is Richard Locke. Richard Locke will be taking over from myself as the acting procurement manager from next Friday. And we'll obviously be coming through to governance and audit. Richard is coming along today to get a feel for things. Okay, so we would normally do Appendix 4 and Appendix 5 and exempt.
Sorry to interrupt, Chair, but I'm now being informed that we do want you to think about and discuss matters relevant to the relevant orange papers.
Okay,
So
well,
you need to go into exempt session to do that.
yes, I think we were making a judgment as to whether we need to do that
Yeah.
rather, because we haven't gone into exempt, right?
You haven't
So
done it yet.
can I move we go into an exempt session if anybody has questions on the exempt report?
Apologies
Is that
to you,
okay?
Greg.
Yep, no worries.
Okay, thank
Right.
you.
Okay, so
You
I'll...
want to do that or not?
Sorry, we okay, Peter?
Yeah, what the Chief Auditor is saying to me is that she definitely needs to raise with you matters that will inevitably mean that you stray into those orange papers. So
Okay.
you will therefore have to go into exempt to do that.
Okay.
That's what I'm being told. That's good.
Well, can you, no, I think we'll deal with the white bits first. And when we need to, Liz, if you give me the signal, we'll then go into exempt.
Apologies
Okay,
if I
it's been agreed, but we're going to exempt if there's anything to be picked up on that. So, Greg, if you want to just
Okay,
deal with the...
just clarifying, those are exempt to do with procurement or to do with audit?
audit.
Okay, would it be... Would you want to carry on from the last, or are you going to do them afterwards? Afterwards, okay. Right, okay, so, good news. The target for procurement as agreed by governance and audit is that we try to get 95% spend compliance, and we've actually achieved that target. We've come in at 96%. The areas where we've had non-conforming spend, 74% of that comes from children's families and education, which is to do with residential placements out of the area, which they are establishing a framework to try and make that compliant moving forward. And also there is always an element of choice within that because it is a children's service. 12% of the remaining is actually from housing and neighbourhood services. However, that's of no concern, or not little concern, because they are actually over target and are at 98%. That's actually a reflection of the fact that they are just such a massive service. So the summary is we're above target on compliance, and where we're not compliant. So, for example, if you move to Appendix 1, Section 2, Children's and Education, you'll see in 2.1 a list of all of the education provisions where that spend is being made, and you'll see the comment that they're establishing a framework. Also, you'll see the spend with Vivid Housing, and obviously Vivid Housing is the spend for the looked after children who are progressing from 16 to 18 arrangements, and that's we have that responsibility, and that's where Vivid come in. So I think Councillor Mason was going to raise some queries on waivers. We're now moving on to Section 2 and Section 3, use of waivers. So the level of waivers being 62%, being 62 is the same as the prior report that came through to Governance and Audit. However, what I would say is that the spend on those 62 waivers is 2.3 million, which is almost half the spend when we were at 62 last time. So the quantum may be towards the upper end, but the actual value is, the actual value is probably, I'm going back and I'm looking at the previous 4 reports, is the third lowest value. Okay. If I go over to details of all the waivers awarded in Q3, you can see that the area with the highest amount of direct awards was Regen, and then followed by the Port, and then to a lesser extent Culture and Corporate. Appendix 2 gives a list of all of those waivers, if you want to discuss any of those. So for example, in regeneration, this covers the period when we were doing all of the Brexit planning. So you will see one in there for Tech Event Services Limited, road welfare facilities, and that's actually to do with the overflow car parking at the top just behind Harbour School by the roundabout there. And you can see details of all the waivers there. I have actually brought all of those waivers with me individually, so I can reference across to any specific individual waivers if there's any you'd like to discuss, Councillor Mason.
I'm not worried about the detail, but you have here 4, one of which you've explained, so the other 3 were insufficient time. How do you satisfy yourself that this is genuine and there really was insufficient time?
Yes. Insufficient time and genuine insufficient time would normally come around, for example, Brexit being a classic case, when we just need to react to something coming from central government. Another thing around insufficient time would perhaps be D-Day event celebrations. So D-Day event celebrations were planned, and then it was announced that very high status leaders from other world countries were arriving, and very quickly we had to put in place contracts. So really it's insufficient time is where there is an unforeseen either issue in the supply market or issue in the demand, which has meant that we've had to be expedient.
In which case, can you, if you can, if not, can you advise us on Berth 2 boarding bridge and satellite reception concept engineering, which has, again, insufficient time? Now, I would have thought this was a long-term plan for the port. Portsmouth International Port is about 2/3 of the way down the page.
Yep. Approximately Berth 2 bridge and satellite reception concept engineering with Hasconing DHB UK. It's for £19,400. Actually, this here we go. It's 4887. Give me a second. And sorry, can you just remind me, have we gone into exempt? I'm just going to read this and see whether we might need to go into exempt. Okay, the value of the waiver here is, I think it was about 20,000, wasn't it? About 19,400. So that falls within the delegated authority to directors of up to 100k. So in essence, what we have here is the file note from Mike Sellers at the port. And in reading the file note, in section 1.5, it simply says the project needs to be completed within a very tight timeline, and Royal Haskell are confident that they can meet this. I think that this is due to, I'm choosing my words carefully, minded of the fact that we're not in exempt. It was essentially due to customer demand placed on the port and technical requirements they might need. So in response to the port's customers would probably be as far as I could go.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any questions in relation to the white paper, the paper in the public domain? No? And I'm going to now move into interpretation has been agreed. So I'll ask for the removal of the press. Thank you.